Sam Butler, 23 games in 4 seasons, has been a real core focus for the West Coast Eagles. I actually really like this. Injury issues has been a big part of his story. Yeah. But as far as style goes, that hardworking small forward who kicks goals, I think this suits West Coast perfectly.
I think Butler's more of a midfielder, like wing.
He was at centre bounces tonight.
That's true, yeah.
He was really good.
Well, this is what I'm saying. I like all these notes and these articles came out, and Butler's just played in 2 finals, and I feel like he'd be pretty happy. He's currently in the team at Hawthorn.
I don't think he'll be leaving Hawthorn. I think he'd be getting bigger offers from elsewhere, though, which is probably where a lot of it's coming from. There'll be a lot of interest for him.
Yeah.
What's his draft history?
I reckon he was a second rounder in like 2021.
And just body problems.
Yeah, 2021, 23 games. But I think if he just played in 2 finals, they've got a good chance of retaining him if they want him. But West Coast would clearly give him all the game time he wants. And that's the biggest connection I've seen to Sam Butler. And we do have a proud history of Sam Butlers. We generally turn them into premiership players. So, speaking of Brisbane Lions midfielders, Lachie Neale to West Coast. I floated this a couple months back as something I'd heard through the grapevine. I think this has been talked about a lot lately, that West Coast have been trying to get Lachie Neale. And it came out through, I think, SEN, but a lot of like Twitter, big footy talk, everyone claiming to know someone who knows Lachie Neale, that he wants to finish his career in Perth. His wife's from Perth, etc. And West Coast are all over him, and Fremantle are, for whatever reason, in a less of a position to try and get Lachie Neale. Having said all that, I saw Ryan Daniels today say he doesn't think it's going to happen. So this might be a non-story. But, you know, I don't know if everyone saw that. So people watching this who have undoubtedly heard about the Lachie Neale thing, I don't think it's going to happen. When Ryan Daniels says it's not going to happen,
it keeps coming up, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He was very close to rejoining Freo a few years back.
Yeah, that's
2022, I think it was, or end of 2021.
Yeah.
Very close to coming back. There was talk in the press conference with our GM if we'd be interested, and they pretty much shut it down straight away. They said the amount of like midfielders at Freo that have asked for more midfield minutes, like guys like Neil Erasmus or O'Driscoll or Murphy Reid. So I don't think we're going to show much interest in him.
It doesn't really make sense other than a romantic notion for Fremantle.
Yeah.
To go
No.
that would be it.
I think it doesn't make sense just from a like we have young players that are going to continue to evolve in there. I think it would stunt the growth of other players. But I think
plus you already have the leadership there.
Yeah, but I think we could benefit from it in the short term, but long term maybe not, because I think it would piss off like a Neil Erasmus. And
he is 33. And you could say, well, you had Fife, but Fife didn't play a big role.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like you wouldn't recruit Lachie Neale to be a Fife replacement.
My only thing to add to that with the West Coast point, like, do you feel Lachie Neale just, I know we don't know him, but he feels like he wants to, win premierships and be in good teams. It would be a pretty big sacrifice.
He would be sacrificing any chance at a flag, obviously, if he left. And
Really?
and some to go to West. Fuck. I thought
How
you
did that get you?
No, I thought he meant like, well, Fremantle can win a flag.
Oh, okay.
And then I saw his stupid little face. Damn, I have a stupid little face. There is no doubt. Some was like reading into the fact that he was gutted to, when he did his injury, there was a real emotional reaction, and they were like, oh, he's played that was his last chance at a flag, but it could have just been disappointment to, be out for the year when Brisbane are in the thick of it. So it was nice while it lasted. This sort of rumour is all West Coast fans have to cling to, and it was really nice for 4 days where I liked Lachie Neale.
I think if Lachie Neale went to West Coast, that would be the turning point for me to say like they can kind of like begin this rebuild. And I'd actually have some confidence that they were going to
begin this rebuild.
Like begin it in the sense that like
begin the rebound, maybe.
Yeah,
because we've been rebuilding undoubtedly, but the rebound.
It would give me confidence that you could bring in new draftees.
Yeah,
and they're going to get better.
Yeah,
around a player like that.
Which clubs could we see facilitating pick splits? Now, there's probably going to be heaps, but we'll look at the top end, and we'll also look at clubs who could trade in and out of that first round. We'll keep it first round relevant.
Gotcha.
Should we just start at the top? West Coast likely to have picks 1 and 2. I wanted to discuss the merits, the Zacks, of potentially West Coast trading one or both, or perhaps neither, of these selections and what do you think they should do in this draft? Dylan, you're the draft man. How do you assess the top end and the pros and cons, I guess, of trading into the middle part of the top 10?
Yeah, without going over old ground, I think there's like a clear top 2 in this draft. So if West Coast did hold those 2 picks with the compensation, the 2 clear talents are obviously Willem Dersma and Cooper Duff-Tyler. But like we've sort of said, and like even talking about Lachie Neale and having that kind of contested first possession ball winner, we've discussed this a lot, that they should probably go for somebody like a Dyson Sharp. The thing is with a Dyson Sharp, he potentially could be available a little bit later as well. And I think that's a player that they definitely should be targeting, at least he or an Oliver Greaves type, which means do they have to be, and this is probably a question back to you as a West Coast fan, do you think they need to be going for someone like a Cooper Duff-Tyler who is a bit more of a ruck forward? You maybe have some of those key position players that play similar role, even though he might be a little bit more talented. Would you like to see them go for someone like that who has the maybe higher upside?
Positionally, it's not a massive need. I think I said last week, like West Coast are pretty keen on archery if it's a forward ruck thing. Yep. We don't have a number 1 ruck. So there's always the question, if CDT is a number 1 ruck, then he becomes immediately more attractive. But my estimation is that that's not necessarily the way he projects. He's probably more that dynamic player. Now, if we were talking about Luke Jackson in 2019, this is a different conversation. I suppose, I don't know if you were following the draft back then. How do you think he compares as a prospect in terms of upside to a Luke Jackson? Yeah,
I mean, I think he's got similar traits. If you look at like numbers of Luke Jackson and Cooper Duff-Tyler at the same age, Cooper Duff-Tyler's finding more of the football. Like he's more of a transitional prospect than even Luke Jackson was at the time. Now I think Luke, it doesn't always work like that, right? That Cooper Duff-Tyler is playing better, kind of looks better at the same time, so then therefore will be better. Because I feel like Jackson, as he's entered the AFL, like he's become so dynamic and so powerful. And like kids when they're this age at like 17, they don't necessarily have that at this age, and they can sort of develop it a little bit later. So I think there's definitely still time for him to be able to do that. But as far as like a kind of all action ruck forward, the way that he can kick the football, like he can pick up the ball at defense and kick it like a midfielder. I've actually seen him take stoppages as a mid, similar to what Luke Jackson does. And his ground level stuff's great. He's really clean with the ball. It is just like, I don't know, that position, it feels risky, right?
Yeah.
And like we talked about with Jackson, it's like, yeah, he's an A grader, but he doesn't have that defined role. And when you're in a rebuild situation like the West Coast Eagles are right now, is that just like too much of a luxury player?
Yeah, I mean, there's always the argument for going for the top upside talent when you have picks this early. But I do think that West Coast is in a not unique position, but in a slightly different position to say if it was Essendon at pick 1, right? We are that far behind that next group of competitive AFL teams that I think these things you consider when you're drafting a Victorian or interstate talent, but particularly Victorian, and particularly for the Vic Metro, is how can we keep this guy interested for the first 3 years of his career? I know that GWS is an example of a team that they'll have their own draft board because of based around guys who think they would actually like commit to the GWS project because of their retention issues over time. I think West Coast is now sort of in that boat. And I not that I'm saying I know anything about CDT or Willem Dersma, but I'm just saying these are factors here. West Coast need to do their due diligence around these sorts of players. And if there's a sniff that these guys would head back to Victoria, Dersma's probably the more obvious red flag with his brothers, particularly if Zane ends up at Essendon, where if these guys are sort of giving out red flags, then I think the argument gets stronger for trading down. And that's when you also consider, I think West Coast greater needs are midfielders. I know every team says that, and we talked about this last week, but I don't know if a team has ever needed midfielders like West Coast need midfielders and ground level players. So I think there's a really strong argument for West Coast trading at least one, if not both of these picks down.
You wouldn't trade pick 1, surely. What would be the difference in value between pick 1 and 2? Like, what could you get if you did trade those away?
From a points perspective or just from a player?
Like value, what would you get back?
Well, like I said, I think like the top 2 picks, there's a gap. So they're kind of like Duff-Tyler and Dersma are sort of considered these like top talents. But then, like we said, at the same time, they're not really perfect for West Coast necessarily. And like that engagement factor of them like going over there, not really being able to impact. Whereas like you look at that sort of more contested midfielder, they're going to be able to come in and play straight away. And they're going to get like perhaps get that kind of nourishment, right?
You're most likely to get more picks out of trading that though, right? Like, would any player come for a high draft pick?
No, I think we'd trade it for picks if that's your question.
So how many do you think you could get for pick 1 or 2?
Probably a couple in the top 10. Well, again, this is hard because last year we speculated about what trading down would look like. West Coast 3 was valued at 12 and 14 last year, which maybe that sounds like West Coast had a brain fart. But then you look at North Melbourne, who live traded a future first to get back into 27. And while I don't think these were good moves, I think that does kind of indicate what the consensus value was of picks in the first round last year. The difference between 3 and later picks was not that high. West Coast could leverage the situation this year, whereas if there is a perception that 1 and 2 are the 2 picks you want to have, we could leverage that into a variety of picks. And that actually might work out.
Yeah.
All this to say, I think there's a good chance West Coast trade 1 of these picks. And it's more likely to be 2 than 1.
The next question there is, who do they trade it? Like, who does it work for? Because we've seen over the last few years, you kind of touched on it there, but like we've seen clubs be hesitant to do this, to give away multiple picks for 1 pick, even if the talent is high. And that's where I feel like a Duff Tytler, like a Willem Dersma, like, I don't know, it's like they're sort of specific players at the same time as well. So that's an interesting fact. I mean, I think the club that jumps out here, right, is like an Essendon.
Yeah. Well, they have a ruck need. And they have a taste for Dersmas.
They have a fetish for Dersmas.
And they also probably want to look at top-end talent, and they have the ammunition of potentially 3 top 10 picks. We don't know yet. Yeah. But also some picks in the 20s that can make this work.
True.
So they're probably the only club that I can think of. There was talk of Gold Coast trading up to 2. That, to me, as time goes on, feels like overkill. If you trade it up to 2 to avoid the bid on Euland and Patterson, what do they get? Like Dersma or CDT, Euland, Patterson? That seems like a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that would make it harder to match in points. So
Absolutely.
It's probably just Essendon.
I think so, because also like the one thing that would like the biggest red flag about that Gold Coast getting up to pick 1, 2 is a lot of the point stuff has changed. So the Gold Coast don't just have an arsenal of picks that they can match these guys as well. So using one of them to actually, using a lot of their earlier picks to get up to that 1 or 2 or whatever it is, actually kind of hurts them to be able to match on Patterson and Euland as well.
100%.
So it does. Like whether they were just sniffing around and having a bit of a look, who knows? But most signs point to Essendon, right?
Agreed. The other curveball here that we cannot really foresee here is, as I've said, I think West Coast pick 2 could come into live play like if a Kerno moves. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I feel like that is the collateral piece that could get to Carlton via 6 different teams to ensure that Carlton, I think they want established players, but let's say like there might be an interest in the draft. If they can get pick 2 for it, might unlock the door a little bit. It could also apply to Essendon with merit, potentially. I don't know how that all looks, but West Coast trade down, get some later picks, and pick 2 ends up at a Carlton or an Essendon. That's probably the other way it happens.
Throw a scenario at me, like a specific scenario where you put up pick 2. What comes back?
I would want one of Essendon or 2 of Essendon's like 5 and 6.
You won't get that.
I agreed.
They're like 7.
But we also have Hawthorn's first rounder.
Yes.
So
2. Throw that back
mind
the
you,
other way.
Hawthorn's just won tonight and thrown. That's pushing it back and back.
Pushing it back.
But let's say it's pick 15. It's probably more like pick 17 now. 2 and 17 for 5 and 6.
I reckon it's worse than 17 though.
What is, sorry?
Euland, Patterson.
Oh,
You're talking about how far it gets pushed back.
Yeah, maybe.
But
that's hard to speculate on now.
It is. I'll take your point.
But it also depends on Essendon's desire to get one of those top 2 players.
Yeah, it's how
and if
much.
they're not that interested, they're not that interested.
And I think that's like just to take that a step back again. Like it's so hard because for West Coast, a player like Cooper Duff Tytler, you might look back on him in 5 years and go like, why did we not pick him up at this point when he's like he was young? We can get that development time into him, and if he does stay at the club, you've got him there ready, and then he's like 26, and then you're drafting these midfielders, and it's kind of all coming together. Whereas like you draft the midfielders now, and then you're chasing that Cooper Duff Tyler player forever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can't find him.
That's true, but I think I have closure over the fact we didn't pick Murphy Reid because I just don't think that plays out the same way.
No, I know.
You know what I mean?
No.
So it's the same thing with CDT here. It's like, I think the risk is so high that if he went to an Essendon and became a star, maybe I would think about it a little bit. But I think I think the arguments against taking a risk on these types of players with a longer development arc from Victoria with Eastern interest. I think that, I don't know. I think there's pros and cons to it.
No, 100%, because there's just more variables. Whereas you bring in a Dyson Sharp, he starts pretty much playing from day dot.
Yeah.
Plays well, improves the team quickly, so you get all that morale as well, right?
Yep.